Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo. It is Mailbag Thursday. Sorry for the late start there, a little bit of technical difficulties. Working with the new system here, testing some new things out. So, of course, we hit technical difficulties right away. But let's not delay and get right into it because the sole purpose for today is to answer your questions on a lovely Mailbag Thursday, and then everybody can get back to watching the U.S. and Finland in the Four Nations. So we have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 questions that we are going to burn our way through here over the next probably 30 minutes or so. Um, so a couple things. If you don't see your question here that you sent in, there's a couple that I pushed to next week, so I want to put more thought behind it. There were some interesting questions. Also, there's some that are combined on similar topics, so I just picked one of the two questions. So if you don't see your question, those are one of the two reasons why. And you'll notice if you have a similar question because it obviously pops up here. All right, so let's start with the first one. So this is one that came in last week. So this came from Tim, and the question is, or comment more or less, is I struggle to connect the high regard the analytics community has for Sam Ventura and company with recent acquisitions like Lafferty, Kubel, Clifton, and re-signing Yoki Haru in the offseason. So Tim went on in his email to kind of explain, um, like it doesn't make sense. Like, is the analytics department being overridden? Are they not as good as they seem based on their regard and their thought around the league? And I think the easiest way to really go through this is, I think, to fully understand how it works. So every single team in the NHL now has an analytics department. That's what it is. That's where we are in today's NHL and in most sports organizations. How it works primarily, from my understanding, in the Sabres front office is that the I guess there's a split, you could say. There is a sometimes one group gets this thing, the other group, being the scouting team, gets the other thing, and then it's a collaborative process that it comes through it all. So, like on the draft side, I think there's a lot of collaboration that goes into it. I think the analytics department gets their information on that. And then on maybe more on the player side, I don't even want to say the scouts get more on that, but really it's collaborative. And I'm not saying like any of these decisions here, Lafferty, Kubel, Clifton, the analytics team wasn't heavily involved in. They're not going to get every single one right, and that's just the way it goes. But I do want to say that I think that the overall sentiment and the overall feeling, the way this team goes, is that it is a very collaborative effort where they take their scouting group and they take their analytics group and they put the two together, and then that's how they come to the decision. Ultimately, the players are going to go after, the deals that they're going to make, and who they're going to export in free agency and even draft. So, very collaborative effort. That is the way it works in the Sabres front office and probably a lot of other places too. Good question, though. I like the start on that one. Good question. Okay, so we will go to the next one here from Joe. Is there any ownership one already? Is there a chance at any point in the near future Terry sells the team? How bad would it have to get? So I don't want to say that there's near future. No, I don't think there's any chance of it in the near future. Down the road as we go here, I think that is always a possibility. Um, I mean, if you look at the way it's split out, the football team just prints money. There's a new stadium coming, and that is, the direction. I don't want to say the direction, but that's a lot of where the focus is on right now, and understandably so. That doesn't mean that Terry ownership isn't involved in what the Sabres do or even has a focus on it. They do, and they're involved in that, and they're around, and there's an eye kept on it. I mean, at one point, a couple of years ago, there was an interest in selling, I believe, a minority share. Never at any point was there ever a full share that was ever available. Even though there was plenty of reports over the years, that was never the case. So the minority share, I think, was something that was put out there at one point. and just never came to fruition, never ended up happening. So to answer the question overall, I don't think that that's in the near future. I think there's some things that they have from the arena that they're working on. I think there's some long-term plans that they're going through that they would have to get through first, and then we can see where they are in a few years. But if that was to happen, like I think you'd be out in the 8 to 10 year range. I don't think there's anything like if they lose the next 2 years, because I forget it, I'm out. We're already at 14 years here, so it really can't get much worse than it already is. Good question again. I was wondering how long it would take somebody to get to the ownership one. It took 2 weeks of questions. All right, let's go. Where do we want to go? I had these in order that I wanted to go, but now I'm jumping around. I probably shouldn't do that. Let's just stay in order. Let's go to the next one. Let's talk about the plan in net. What is the plan in net going forward, and do you think it will work? So this one is from David, and this, in David's email, I think it was more referring to the struggles that we've seen this year from Luukkonen, and then even when Levi has come up, it really hasn't looked that good in that regard, although his AHL numbers have been impressive. So I think the easy question is the plan and goal going forward for them is still Luukkonen. He just signed a new contract. He's in year one of that. He still has 3 or 4 years remaining, from the top of my head. So that's the plan. He's going to be your goaltender for the foreseeable future moving forward. Levi, I think, is the interesting one where we're gonna see how they want to work him in. This is year 2 now. It started where they tried to jam him in, and it just didn't work, and he just wasn't ready yet. And there's really nothing wrong with that. You can see that he fits and where he belongs in the AHL right now. That is the right pace for him. That is the right skill level, and he can continue to grow and develop his game, playing at that level. I think what we're seeing this year is James Reimer really step in and do a good job as a capable backup. I think there's been some points this season where, for some reason, they felt they couldn't rely on him, and they forced Levi in, and it's cost them a few games because of that. So I think the plan, if you want to go on the short term, where I think they should go is obviously they're going to stick with Luke, and that's not going to change. I know he's having a down year, and it is what it is, and you go and you hope he bounces back next year. But I think it's important to have that capable backup. And I don't think we need to go into a third season here with Devin Levi and try to force it in. There's nothing wrong if he starts again in the AHL. I think we'd be in year 3 of it, so maybe there's a little bit more urgency to get him to the NHL. But my thing between the two of them that I think is going to be interesting to see how they try to balance this out moving forward is both of them need to play to be successful. So if we saw an alternating thing in the NHL didn't work for either of them. Luukkonen is usually at his best when he gets rolling and gets playing. Levi does not really know how to be a backup and to sit for 2 weeks without playing a game. And I think that's going to be the difficult thing. That's going to be the difficult part to balance. Is one of those guys are going to have to adjust, maybe even both of them, to figure out how they're going to make this work if it's going to be a duo. If it's not, then I think what you need to do is it's probably Levi's. You need to figure out to use your asset now, move it for something, and then bring in a capable backup that you kind of just rotate in every few years, and then you can build up another goaltender through the bottom of your system. So, goaltending, man, it's a crazy thing. We've talked about it numerous times in numerous podcasts. It's up and down, up and down. You never really know what you're going to get. You can't trust them to be reliable. There's really only 2 to 3 goaltenders in this league that consistently give you that high level performance. And you kind of just got to ride the wave and hope that, your goaltender performs at a better pace than not throughout the entirety of the season. And maybe you can put together a couple of years of that to propel your team moving forward. All right, let's go to a question on defenseman. What do the Sabres do with Mattias Samuelsson moving forward? So this is from Daniel. So Daniel had a long email where he basically ranked out some of the he listed the options, wanted me to rank them. So it's keep Samuelsson, it's buy him out, it's trade him, and trade him with retention. I'm very curious to see what they end up doing here. I don't know. really what they want to do. I think the injury thing is really becoming frustrating, and to a degree, like you can't help it. It happens, but the guy is just not available enough to be relied upon year in and year out. If you're only getting half a season from him, and that half season you're getting really isn't even that great, how do you handle that moving forward? So I think the first thing they would probably try to do is they would look at their trade options. I don't think they're going to retain on him for the next 6 years. That seems a little bit much. So I can't see that one being a possibility. But I definitely think what they're going to do in the offseason is they're going to go look at the options to move him. You know, it's a hefty contract. I think it's five years, maybe 6 years remaining on that still. So that's tough that you have to go through that. But I mean, the salary itself isn't that bad, especially with the salary cap going up. So you maybe can get through it that way. So yeah, 4.28 million dollars for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So it's 5 more years remaining on that contract. It's not something that's immovable for a player who's only 22, 23 years old. I think a team seeing him and his size would take a chance on that. Uh, if there's not, then the question becomes, well, do you do a buyout? Uh, the thing about the buyout that some people might not know is because of his age, it's only a 1/3 buyout. So essentially, it's a cheaper buyout moving forward because he's under a certain age. I believe the buyout carries out for 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a low number. It's like $700,000. I'm trying to, yeah. So it pulls out to be $714,000 for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 8, 9, 10 years. So I don't know. Do they want to pull another buyout out of there? That's two buyouts that you're going to have on your books for the next couple years. I don't know if they want to do that, but with how cheap it is, $700,000 is just it's pennies when you consider on the salary cap. I think it should be out there as an option. I don't know that they would really go that route. I think they will try really hard to move him at full boat before that, and they might even just say we'll keep him before they buy him out. I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I think the Skinner buyout already in the books probably prohibits them doing this. I think if they didn't buy Skinner out, then maybe it would be more something they consider. But we'll see. We'll see where things go here over the next few months of the season. Does he get back from his foot injury? Is he going to miss the majority of the remaining of the season? We'll see, and maybe that helps them determine what they're going to do with him moving forward. All right, let's see what we have next here. Is there any hope for significant upgrades to the hockey ops department with Terry Pegula as the owner of the team? This question comes from Zachary. So we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, the first question with the front office itself. They do have one of the smaller front offices in the league. I don't think that that's necessarily prohibitive. I mean, don't get me wrong. Having more eyes out there, more scouts isn't the worst thing in the world. But I don't think that necessarily is holding them back. I'm not really sure where Zach's going with significant upgrades here. Is it just more scouts? Is it a hockey ops president? The hockey ops president thing, it's tough because I think, and I wrote about it a couple months ago when they were going through the losing streak, that I think they could use somebody with experience in here for the sole purpose, perhaps, of just credibility, right? Just somebody in here to have those conversations, somebody in here that you can use as we're a serious hockey team, talking to agents, talking to players, trying to get trades done, somebody who has that background. I think that's something that this team could use. But my fear is what would happen is I don't see a scenario where Terry Pegula brings somebody in over top of Kevin Adams. So one of two things would have to happen. It would be a full clear out, which I don't really think that's on the table. Or it would be you're going to move Kevin Adams into, that promotion, quote unquote promotion, if you will. and then you're gonna move up Jason Karmanos, and he would be your new general manager. And Karmanos himself has more experience as a in hockey operations than Kevin Adams does. He's been with the Penguins and the Hurricanes for many years before being with the Sabres. He's respected. He knows how to get things done, trade conversations, contract, players, agents, scouting. Um, really when you see Karmanos out on the road scouting, especially on a particular team, you really want to pay attention because he's the guy. I think that I don't want to say he's the final say, but really is like the guy that goes and looks at players that are serious and watches them, and then reports back to Adams with what he sees and his scouting reports. And that was the case last year, with Bo Byram. He was the one that was out there a few times in Colorado, watching, as we found out now, Byram play, and probably one or two other Avalanche, but we'll never know. So yeah, I think they like Karmanos. I think Karmanos is due for an opportunity in this league to run his own team. So if you're looking for a change, I think maybe that's the direction he would go. But I just don't see any scenario here in the offseason where they wipe out that front office. I think financially it's too much. Um, I just don't think Terry Bagula just has the interest in doing that and rebuilding a whole entire front office again. So I guess overall, to answer the question, do I see a scenario where there's significant upgrades? Probably not. I think there's a possibility they can hire a few more people depending on what the needs are and how Kevin Adams communicates that to Bagula and gets that done. But I don't think we're going to see anything earth shattering or shaking here in the near future. All right, let's go to this one. So Rickard Rakell, we talked about him a little bit yesterday. I stumbled over that. So the question here from Riley: what's the best package that you can put together for Rakell? I'm trying to think of which way I want to go here. So I think that he. I mean, I don't really want to do this. I'm having a hard time putting it together. So I'll just go about it this way. I think I'll go off of what Pittsburgh wants, and I think what Pittsburgh wants is a young NHL ready or already in the NHL player. So is it Jack Quinn? Is it, we talked about Consta Helenius? Is it Isaac Rosen? Is there, I don't know, do they maybe like Ryan Johnson? Although I would doubt it. I don't think he's somebody that really gets a lot of people going these days. So I think those are a few guys that you would look at that the Sabres, I think, would have interest to varying degrees in moving. I mean, there's other prospects. There's Noah Ostlund. I don't know how close NHL ready he is, but maybe that's somebody else they'd have interest in too. So I think that there's a possibility to put together a package. And let's just be real about it. Let's Rickard Rakell, 3 more years, a good hockey player, $5 million, a reasonable contract. He's 31 years old. He's a good veteran. You can play in your top 6, and as he ages, maybe down into your middle 6. You can play in a lot of different situations. So he's a valuable player. So I think if there's a scenario where you can do, let's just say Helenius for Rakell 1-for-1, that's something I'd probably entertain, to be perfectly honest. And I know that doesn't sound great to move your 11th overall pick from last year, but I mean, we sit here and have these conversations of saying, we have all of these prospects, so why don't we just move them? And I think when that opportunity, kind of like what we saw Matt Savoy last year, moving Matt Savoy for Ryan McLeod was not a favorite idea of a lot of people. It seems so far, and we haven't seen Savoy play in the NHL yet, but so far that's reaping benefits for the Sabres. McLeod has been more than what they've asked for from a production standpoint. He's been a fine third-line center this season for them. So I think when you look at Rakell, you have to look at that in a similar situation where it might hurt to move a player that you consider to be, I guess a centerman on the team moving forward. But if you look at the way the team is set up right now, if Tage can go back to center, and then if they're going to have Kulik now who's a centerman, and then you're going to have McLeod here for the foreseeable future as a centerman, it really kind of blocks up. And depending on what you do with Cousins too, if you move Cousins for another center, then that's another roadblock. So there seemingly is a roadblock at the NHL level. So if you want my best package that I think would really something that would be entertained by the Penguins, it's probably Rakell for Helenius. and maybe something else, and grit your teeth and get that done. And I get it. Some people won't love that, but we're in the business now of trying to make the NHL team better. And you got to move on from the 18-year-old, 19-year-old. And if he goes and plays well in Pittsburgh eventually, then so be it. But you need somebody here to come help this team now and help this team be a playoff team next season. Where are we now? Oh, Lindy Ruff question. Okay, what's your thoughts on whether or not Lindy is capable of coaching this team to success next season? So this question came based off of the athletic report that came out where he was listed as, somebody that players might not want to play for. There were some comments about him not understanding the game anymore, and it's passed him by. Um, so what are my thoughts on him next season? I think so. Here's where I go with Lindy. I think it's been pretty up and down this year for him overall. I think starting the year, there were some questionable decisions from a lineup perspective to an on ice perspective. That's understandable. It's a new team. You're trying to get a feel for what works, what players works in certain situations, and you try to work through that, and you hope that doesn't prohibit you from winning games. And I think it was a factor. I'm not saying it was a primary factor in the way their season has gone. But I will say over the last little bit here, I think we're starting to see some things really stick. I think the offensive game is improving. I can't really remember the last time that I sat here and thought, man, they are just not generating tonight. It's probably been a month or two now that we've gone, maybe a month, I will say. Well, we've gone without having that type of game. So the offense is improving. The scoring is where it was a couple years ago. So that's a good thing, and that's something we've seen improve. I think the defense still has some ways to come. I think he's working through that. I think there's a lot of young players in this team that are understanding and still learning how to play defensively in this league, and that's maybe something we're going to see some growth pains on this season still as they work their way through that. The power play has definitely been a disappointment, and you leave that at the feet of Seth Apper. Ruff holds that too. We've talked about that here in the last few podcasts. So the power play is certainly a disappointment. The penalty kill I thought has been pretty good. And I think the lineup decisions are getting better. Kubel was waived. Lafferty now seems to be the odd man out when everybody's healthy. And Kozak is coming up and playing ahead of him. And some other guys defensively are being scratched. Yoki Haru's not getting those top 4 minutes anymore. So I think now he's at the point where he understands what he has fully on this team. And he's putting the best roster on the ice that he can. And for the most part, it has, I guess, kind of been better definitely than what it was in that 13-game losing streak. I still think they're like an above 500 team since then. So I guess overall, to answer the question, I don't have a ton. I'm not as concerned as I was maybe a month or two ago about Ruff next season. I do think they have to let him make changes to his staff. It's tough because Marty Wolford, he runs that penalty kill that does a good job, but the defense really just isn't getting where it needs to go. So maybe let him make a change there. And then Appert, I think, is an interesting one because the organization feels highly of him. So are they going to let him throw him out the door after one season? I'm not quite sure that would happen, but I guess we'll see when the season's over. But I think Marty Wolford might be one, if Ruff stays, that we do see a change there, and he brings somebody else he's more familiar with to run the defensive side of the bench, and then we'll see, where that goes. All right, the last one here. Is it worth pushing extra chips on the table and going after Brandt Clarke out of LA? This question comes from Ben. So Clarke is an interesting player to look at. So I saw this question. I was doing some research on him. Jeez, hit the microphone. A lot of his numbers are impressive for a player of his age. His microstat numbers in all 3 zones are really good for the most part. Offensively, passing, entries, his exit numbers are pretty good. Entry defense, not so great. His underlying numbers, so if you look at Evolving Hockey, his REPM numbers, Offensively, great. Power play numbers, kind of eh. But where the concern gets for me in the overall fit for Clarke is where he would play on this team. So his defensive numbers are not good. He is the third highest expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. When you have a bad defensive player in the LA Kings system, red alarm bells start going off for me. Because a lot of the players that come out of that Kings system, I know they changed coaches, so maybe it's not the same, but still, a lot of those players know how to play defensive hockey. And some of the numbers are even inflated defensively. When you have a player like this that is grading out this poor defensively, when you take him out of that, it's probably going to be worse. Now, if they were to make that move, what I would say is the best fit for him is he would have to play with Rasmus Dahlin. He has to. Dahlin's the best defensive on this team. That is who he would have to play with. And I think those two as a pairing probably could work. Now it gets into the issue, though, is, well, you have Byram and he plays with Dahlin. You can't really move Byram with power. We know that doesn't really work. And then you're going to have an issue of, okay, am I going to play power on a line, Byram on a line? We know Byram really is at his best when he plays with Dahlin. If you're going to pay him a contract off of playing with Dahlin, then you want to keep him there. So then you could say, okay, well, then you could move Byram. But then you're using a piece to go get a Byram replacement that'll probably cost you significant assets to go do so. And it just seems like you're shuffling deck chairs, really. Now, if you use, let's say you use Byram and just hypothetical, let's say you use Byram and Cousins to go get Pettersson. And then if you want to use some of your future assets, which, again, I'm not really sure that's what LA is looking for, which makes this difficult. They don't want futures. They want current players that help them now. So, I mean, you're going to have to, I don't know, if you move Cousins, like I don't know what fits. They're looking for scoring. And that's what LA wants. They're looking for scoring forwards. I don't think Jack Quinn's enough to get you Brandt Clarke. I don't think Jack Quinn in a first round pick or a second round pick. That's not what they want. They want a player that can come in and play in the Western Conference and score for them. But I think that's where it's a difficult match there. It's not going to be cheap, and I think that you're going to give up assets to replace something that you essentially already have. It's already there and you know works with your top defenseman. So why are you going to give up more significant pieces to go chase that player? Just for me overall, I don't think that it's a good fit. I don't think it's a good match. And I'd rather use those assets somewhere else. I'd rather go out and get a right shot defenseman that might not cost me as much from an asset situation. More of a veteran player, more experience, more reliable defensively that I could put with Owen Power and have a consistent top four if I am going to keep Byram together with Dahlin. That is the approach that I would take. Well, Brandt Clarke is a good player. He has a high level of talent. I just think overall for what this team needs, another young defenseman that is not good defensively is not really something that you need to add to this mix. So I would go use my assets elsewhere if it was truly up to me. Okay, 28 minutes. This one I try to not go as long to save my voice and my energy and stamina, because sometimes this is the similar things that we talk about, now that we're doing this 3 times a week. So we went through all those questions. Like I said, there's more that came in. I really appreciate everybody sending them in. I'll save those for next week. There were some really good ones on more kind of a thought-provoking aspect, not just related to the team, but future and other ideas. So keep firing those questions in. We'll get as many as we can every single Thursday. And then, we'll keep, trugging along here through the rest of the Four Nations break. Canada with a nice win over Sweden yesterday. That was a hell of a fun overtime. And Finland in the U.S. going at it right now. And then this weekend, very exciting, U.S. Canada. That'll be fun. That'll be must see TV right there. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. Again, I really appreciate everybody sending in the questions. And we will talk to you again at this point next week, next Monday. So check us out then. We'll talk to you then. See ya.